Zuby, the one, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and the only. Welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. How are you?
I am doing great as always, Peter. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. So you're in Dubai now.
I am. I became a resident a year ago and I officially moved here in March. So that's about 2, 3 months ago. And yeah, it's been fantastic so far. I've been traveling a lot. I mean, I've been homeless for the past 3 years prior to
Yeah.
moving here, just moving around nonstop. So it's good to finally have a home base.
What does one do in Dubai? What do you do in Dubai? Like, what's a day like in Dubai?
Man, well, the truth is, wherever I am in the world, I tend to have a pretty similar schedule. I mean, I
Okay.
wake up, I pray, I read my Bible, I go to the gym, I do some language learning. At the moment, I'm learning Spanish, trying to upskill on Spanish,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I get to work. I do my work. I mean, I'm location independent in terms of all the work that I do. So it doesn't really matter what country or city I'm in. I get that done. But then outside of that, I mean, man, just normal things. I see my friends. I have family here. My sister and her entire family have lived here for 10 years. So I've got friends here. I make business connections. I go to restaurants and malls and all the usual things that people do
Yeah,
in big
it's
cities. It's
interesting.
just in a big
Yeah.
desert.
Yeah, every single person I've spoken to absolutely loves Dubai. And why do
Mm.
people love Dubai so much?
Yeah, I mean, Dubai is one of the most polarizing cities, I find. I find that people who have been here and spent time here and live here tend to really love it, whereas a lot of people who just see things online and read things online, oftentimes, not always, but they oftentimes have a negative view of it. And honestly, I've dealt with that my entire life. I mean, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, which I think is
Yeah,
probably the most controversial country in the world. And
yeah.
I lived there for 20 years. And so I think when it comes to the entire Middle Eastern region, including the Gulf countries, there's the reality and then there is the public global perception. And there can be a sometimes absolute gigantic disparity in those things. And what's unique about the region as well is despite the fact that so few people have actually been here and spent significant time here, if they've stepped foot at all, is that everyone seems to have a really strong opinion. So if you ask most people, what's your view on Uzbekistan? What's your view on Vanuatu? What's your view on Benin? What's your view
Yeah,
on East Timor? People generally are like, I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know anything about
yeah.
it. But if you ask someone their view on Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar, oftentimes they'll have like a really strong, charged up opinion that is usually based off of complete ignorance, and you find that people don't typically do that. So I think that's a reason for it. But I mean, in terms of the practical things, reasons why a lot of people love Dubai: tax-free country, pretty much no tax, which is a very big deal. Like it's actually a major deal. Good weather if you like hot weather, if you like the sun and you don't like dealing with the
Dry, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you don't like winter and rain, then Dubai is good for that. It's one of the cleanest cities in the entire world. It's one of the safest, if not the safest cities in the entire world. There's virtually no crime. It's extremely family friendly. You go out, there's families, little kids, babies all over the place, babies everywhere. Super family friendly place, very good amenities, good infrastructure. There's a lot to do. Um, what are the other? I mean, that's quite a few right there. I'll tell
Can
you
you?
another thing that
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you one more thing that I actually really like about Dubai and the UAE in general, which is that actually I'll tell you two things. Number one is that it's a fantastic entrepreneurial hub. So
Uh-huh.
because people intentionally move here, there's a sort of naturally selective process in who ends up here. So no one is here for no reason, right? Almost everyone you talk to, they're doing something interesting. They're an entrepreneur, they're doing a business, or they're working for whatever company, because nobody is unemployed, essentially. Everyone's got a job. And then the other thing is that there's no politics. There's no culture war. There's no, if you
Oh,
think about, if like, think for yourself, Peter, because you're deep in this, right? Think of the amount of headspace and energy and stress and time and frustration you and other Americans deal with day to day, year to year,
insane.
just with, yes. And what's interesting is when you come here, it just turns off. It's like this
What a
dark
freedom.
cloud. Yeah, it's like this dark cloud just sort of lifts off of you and you focus on the things I believe you're kind of supposed to focus on. You focus on your work, you focus on making money, you focus on your health, you focus on seeing your friends. If you've got a family or children, you focus on that. And you're not caught up in this left versus right, red versus blue, race war, gender war, all just all the stuff that people are constantly complaining about online and offline. It just kind of turns off, and you're just kind of in this peaceful zone or bubble where you're like, oh, actually, what did I used to think about and talk about before all of this stuff sort of seemed to consume everything? So that's, I'd say, an underrated factor about it as well. Does it have its cons? Yes, of course it does.
Yeah. So I just two questions, and then I want to dive into things that you're known for. Two quick questions. Can you buy a beer there? Like if you want to go out and get some wine?
Yeah, no problem. So if you want to buy alcohol and keep it in your house, then you need a license. So there's an annual license that you can buy. So if you want to just like have your wine or your cognac or whatever in your house, but they serve alcohol in restaurants, in nightclubs, in hotels. So you can't like walk around drinking in public, and they don't take kindly to public intoxication. But it's not like Saudi Arabia, which is like a totally dry country. So there's some restrictions, but there is alcohol and people do drink. It's not a big deal.
And is there a discrimination against Christians there?
20% of the population is Christian. So the church I go to in Dubai, so I believe there's 12 churches in Dubai, including one of the biggest Catholic congregations in the entire world. And the church I go to, actually, Fellowship of the Emirates, I mean, they have 7 services every Sunday. In fact, it's so oversubscribed that they're trying to find another building. And when I say services, I'm talking, 500 to 1,000 people at each one. And this is just one church of 12. So no, they have, obviously they have mosques, they have churches, they even have synagogues here, which may surprise some people. It's an incredibly diverse place. I mean, you have to remember that 90% of the population is foreign. Only 10% of the population is Emirati. So they maintain their culture, and of course, their religion is important to them. But there is religious freedom. The one thing that you are not allowed to do is you're not allowed to try to convert Muslims to other religions. So they wouldn't take kindly. If you were going out in public and, out there on the street trying to, convert Muslims to Christianity or whatever it may be, then they don't take kindly to that. But if you want to wear your cross in public or your Star of David, and you want to go to church and you want to pray and you want to have a Bible or you want to have, a Torah, whatever it is, that's no problem. In fact, if you go to the malls, they even sell, like if you go, there's a lot of jewelry here. So they have the big gold malls and everything, and they openly sell crucifixes and, symbols of other religions and things like that. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's totally fine.
That's interesting. I would imagine, and this is the last question on this.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, because I've never been there, and I'm just so struck by every time I talk to someone how much they like it. So can you talk about religion with people? You just can't try to convert them, but can you criticize religion? Or
so I was just look, the best way to put the UAE, the best way to explain a lot of the questions that people have is, if you simply, the big overarching rule, I would say, in Dubai and most of the UAE is just be, obviously don't harm people, don't take people's stuff, don't do drugs. They're strict on drugs. And then beyond that, I mean, and I say beyond that, but it's really tied into it. It's like, just be respectful to other people, right? Don't do stuff that's going to agitate people or anger them, right? You've probably seen stories, and people will make a big deal. Oh my gosh, someone went to jail for having sex on the beach in Dubai, or someone went to jail
I have seen those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should be having sex on the beach anywhere, to be quite frank. I don't actually think that's legal in the UK or the US either, right? It's public indecency. Right? Or something like someone, I don't know, getting out of their car and like screaming at one of the locals and cussing at them and stuff like that, you'll probably get arrested for that. So to some people that might be quote unquote extreme, but it's like if you're just a normal person, if you're just normal and you act normally and you mind your business and you have conversations, when people are talking here, there's not this like fear of, oh my gosh, like I can't say this, I can't. In fact,
Yeah.
I'd say people speak more freely here
Yeah, I
than they
believe
currently
that.
do in the West, right? People have conversations, people have religious conversations for sure. I mean, I have friends, some are Muslim, some are Hindu, some are atheist. I was having a big debate with one of my atheist friends literally 2 days ago, and then yesterday I had some Muslims trying to convert me to Islam because they saw my beard, and I think they assumed I was Muslim, and I told them I was Christian, and we were just having a conversation, but there was no, it was just respect.
Animosity. There was no
No
animosity.
animosity. No animosity. Like if you wanted to go outside and I don't know, hold a placard. And by the way, I'd say insulting any religion, they wouldn't take kindly to that. If you wanted to hold some big some sort of public demonstration, something like that, and they'll be like, no, we don't like this. This is disruptive to the harmony of our people. We've got people here from 150 plus different countries of all different backgrounds, different faiths, different ethnicities, or whatever. Just, respect other people, and you're not going to have any problems. It's not somewhere where you have to live in fear.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe Reed and I should head to Dubai. It just sounds like a fascinating experience to me. Okay, so I wanted to throw out some questions about some of the things you're known for, which is you give great advice: diet, sleep, exercise. You motivated me to do my chin-ups after I saw your chin-ups, and I did 20 chin-ups, and then people said, well, he didn't go all the way down. I'm like, what are you talking? I'm like, all right, I'll do another 20. My shoulder's been super bad lately, but I haven't. But so talk to me a little bit about your there you are, I think. Was that when you broke the woman's world record?
Yeah, that was the very famous video of the 230 kilo women's breaking deadlift record.
Yeah, I showed that in
Yeah.
my class, and someone complained.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
no way! I want to know.
yeah.
I want to know more now.
Well, someone I showed, what, I can't remember. It was just so long ago. I showed that. When did you release that? What year did you release that?
Early 2019.
Okay, so that was when the madness was really, like, you couldn't question or challenge the madness at all. Reed, let's play that so people can see it, because this is a historic. Well, okay, it's a historic video. Reed said he just played it, but so somebody in my class complained to someone in the administration that I had showed an anti-trans video.
Interesting.
So why don't you tell people what you did in that video?
Yeah, sure. So this is going back to February 2019. Honestly, it's kind of crazy to me that that's over 5 years ago now, because it doesn't feel like it. So I mean the tweet. Okay. I'll give a little bit of context. So
please.
I went full time with my music in 2011. So from 2011 onwards, anyone who knew me just knew me as Zuby the rapper. That was all I was doing. From about 2012 onward, I started to notice a shift in the West in general. And I started to notice, I'm a perceptive person, and I started to see the early signs of what people now commonly refer to as wokeism. Before, people were calling, social justice warriors and that type of stuff. So, and then coming around sort of mid 2010s, it seemed to certainly intensify. And that's when a lot of the gender ideology and the transgenderism went mainstream. It went mainstream in 2015 with the whole Caitlyn Jenner situation. And I think people forget how impactful that was. And when that whole thing was happening, there was something really struck me, because there was this individual who was around 60 years old at the time, famous, been on TV a lot, part of a famous family, fathered multiple children, won multiple Olympic gold medals under the name of Bruce. And he comes out and he says, I now identify as a woman. Call me Caitlyn. I'm now a woman. No dream, no journalist, nobody in the press that I'm aware of asked the obvious question, which is like, what do you mean? What exactly does that mean? right? I mean, if you, Peter, tomorrow said that, you're a woman, and I would expect that people would be like, well,
Reed would try to
maybe
jump in bed with me.
yeah, I mean, I think I think there's even for the most understanding, most compassionate, most libertarian-minded person, I think there's a reasonable question of like, okay, like what do you mean by that, right? And the response was just, oh my gosh, this is amazing, so stunning, so brave, woman of the year, interviews everywhere, magazine covers, all this. So I was just like, okay, this is weird. Like we're in a weird place where, how is no one even asking these questions? And then of course that whole issue just continued to intensify, as well as the strange conversations happening around race and sexuality and so on. So I was observing all this, and then I remember in 2016, of course, that's when the Bill C-16 was being proposed in Canada. This is when I first discovered Jordan Peterson and Professor Gad Saad. In fact, I was listening to a lot of Joe Rogan's podcast. I was listening to lots of the Rubin Report. This is when what people call the intellectual dark web, right? There was that time, lots of these conversations were happening. So I was just, as an observer, watching and listening to a lot of this. I mean, professionally, I'm just a rapper, and I never thought to really use my platforms to put out a lot of my thoughts and ideas around culture or politics or society or anything like that. Not because I was afraid per se, but I was just like, the world doesn't really need my voice on this stuff. I mean, I don't have some supercharged opinion on this. I'm a pretty normal, level-headed guy. I have my beliefs, of course. I have my views, but I never thought that they were all that interesting, shall we say. And then in 2018, it was still just growing and intensifying. And there weren't that many people who were saying what I was thinking, at least not out loud. I'd have conversations in private with people, with friends, with family, acquaintances, and, discuss some of these things and raise some of my concerns about where it seemed to be going. And most of this was me seeing what was happening in the US and a little bit in Canada. It wasn't so much in the UK at the time, at least not in a way that was in your face. And so all of that happened. And then we went through a weird period in 2015 and 2016 because, we had the whole mainstreaming of trans, but then there was also in the UK, there was Brexit. And in the US, there was the whole Trump situation. And this just jacked up the temperature even more. Yeah. And then in 2018 was when I started using the platform of Twitter to just voice a few more of my ideas, right? I started to wade into some of these conversations a little bit more and ask questions and just state my positions on these. By this time, I'd become very aware of this situation of males identifying as women and entering female spaces, female sports, female changing rooms, female prisons, and just this idea that, hey, there's now supposedly infinite genders. Remember when Facebook went from having 2 gender options to having many dozens and all of this? And I was just like, what is going on here? This is very weird. My whole life, things have been quite normal. And then suddenly everybody, let me not say everyone is getting possessed by this mind virus, but a lot of people are getting possessed by it. And those who aren't saying anything. And there's not a lot of pushback. And so February 2019 comes along. I was actually running one of my pop-up shops, selling my t-shirts, my hats, my merchandise, and my CDs. And I saw a story. This is February 2019. I saw a story online about males beating females in various athletic events in the USA. I think this was at high school or college level. And I was just like, this is so goofy. Like what is going on here? And then I was like, I wonder what the British women's deadlift record is. I mean, I've got I'm a strong guy. I have a strong lift. So I was on my phone and I just searched UK women's deadlift record. And in my weight class, it was 215 kilos. For American listeners, 215 kilos is around 500 pounds. I think it's a little bit under 500 pounds. And I was like, oh, my maximum is 275. So I can beat that by, 100 pounds plus. And so I already had a video on my phone, that video that was played earlier. I already had that video on my phone just from one of my random training sessions. So I just took my phone like I do with all my other tweets, and I just typed something. I keep hearing about how biological men, I keep hearing about how men have no advantage over biological women in 2019. So watch me destroy the British women's deadlift record without trying. P.S. I identified as a woman whilst lifting the weight. Don't be a bigot. At the time I posted that, I had 18,000 followers on Twitter. I had a following, but it was much smaller than what I have today. I didn't think this was going to be some career-defining moment or some global sensation or anything. I just thought it's kind of funny, and it's making a point just about the silliness of this issue, which not a lot of people were talking about at the time. And after I hit the post button, I just was looking at my phone and I was like, what is happening? Because the numbers were just ticking up. I'd never had a post before where the numbers were just refreshing in real time. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, just, this is retweets, just growing. Within 15 to 20 minutes, the video had reached 10,000 views. And I'd gained like a few hundred followers, and it just kept growing and growing. For several days on end, I remember I was gaining over 100 followers per hour for weeks, and it just kept going. By the time I went to bed that night, the video had 300,000 views. I woke up in the morning, it's over 500,000. Following day, it hits 1 million. I start getting emails. I start getting phone calls from the BBC, Sky News, Fox News, all of these different platforms saying, hey, we want to talk to you about your viral post. We want to know why you did this, what's the point you're making, and so on. And people were reacting to it. I remember Tucker Carlson saw the video and did a piece on Fox News about it. Ben Shapiro responded to it. Steven Crowder. Keep in mind, I'm just an independent British rapper at the time. I had no following in the USA or anything like that at the time. Piers Morgan, a whole bunch of people. And this just goes on for weeks, and I'm appearing on various interviews and just stating my position. And then one morning I wake up and my phone is going bananas. My phone is just going crazy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what has happened? And everyone's like, dude, Joe Rogan just mentioned you. Yo, Joe Rogan just shouted you out. I'm like, whoa, what happened? You have to remember, I'm in the UK, and this is when Joe was in California. So keep in mind the time difference. So his show's at night, and then I'm waking up in the morning in the UK. And apparently, I just a couple hours ago, he shouted me out on his show. So I'm there. I'm trying to find the podcast, trying to find the segment. I'm listening to it. And he and Brian Callen did like a two, they went Brian, through it. They read it out on air. That's when Joe started following me. He was like, I'm following this guy right now. This guy's hilarious. And so he followed me and sent me a DM. So all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap. Like I'm suddenly on the radar and having conversations with some of the biggest media personalities and podcasters in the world. And then the ball just kept on rolling from that point onwards. I could go into it in more detail, but I don't want to be too long-winded with the story. But it was a real impactful moment.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I'm just so happy for your success. That's great.
Thank you.
I have your last album, which I think is great. Listen to it. I wanna. Yeah, that's just a crazy story. I'm letting that percolate right now. I want to talk about diet, sleep, and exercise, and then kind of life tips, because I think that will really help people. So awesome. I normally do not ask people what they eat throughout the day, but I am going to ask you if that's okay. So do you intermittent fast? What do you eat when you wake up, or do you eat at all? Do you have coffee? What do you do?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm going to assume this is during a time when I'm not traveling, because I travel a lot and my things get a bit hectic. But what I typically do, so for the past, I'm 37 years old right now. And when I was 21 or 22, I discovered intermittent fasting. Shout out to Martin Burkhan from leangains.com, because he was actually the guy who really popularized it about a decade before it went more mainstream. So I came across his work. At the time, I was just a sort of regular bodybuilding bro doing the sort of 5 to 6 meals a day, worrying about going catabolic if I didn't get my protein in within 3 hours. And
Muscle eating.
I,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I read his stuff, and it was so counter to the typical bodybuilder, power lifter way of doing things. And so I gave it a shot, and I've maintained it pretty much ever since. So I typically do sort of 16/8 intermittent fasting. So that is consuming no calories at all for 16 hours of the day, 7 of which I'm sleeping. And then I have an eating window of about 8 hours. I'm not overly strict on it because I don't need to be, but that's typically how I eat. So my usual pattern is I wake up normally around between 6:30 and 7. I do my usual morning routine, which I laid out earlier. I'll typically be in the gym by.
Okay, pause.
Okay.
Let me put you there. So you do so I do intermittent fasting as well. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I found it to be absolutely brutal the first week, difficult the second week, and now it's effortless. I don't even think about it. In fact, I'm drinking water right now. I woke up early for this. I also do that Huberman protocol where I wait 90 minutes before I consume caffeine. I was going to debate ChatGPT if you didn't show up today, but I told Reed I can't do it without a cup of coffee. So what do you do if you stay up late and or you're out with friends late? Do you add those days to the next hours of intermittent fasting the next day? Because that's what I do. Like last night we went out after jiu-jitsu, we went to barbecue, and we stayed out. I can't remember exactly, but I think my last bite and drink was at like maybe 10. And so then I'm just going to add those 2 days to 2 hours. Do you do that as well or no?
I'm just intuitive.
Okay.
I used to be a lot more firm with it. There was a time when I got down to, just having a 4-hour eating window and fasting for 20 hours, but I'm just very flexible. My diet isn't that interesting because it's very flexible and intuitive at this point. I've been training regularly since I was 16, so over 20 years. And so I just listen to my body. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat.
Okay.
So that's right. That's probably the best way to answer it. So if I had a meal, if I ate later than usual the night before, I'm typically not going to be hungry until at least, 12 plus hours after it. So if I ate a meal at 10 p.m., I usually don't eat in the morning anyway. I normally break my fast around midday, but I never wake up hungry.
Okay, yeah, I don't either. So okay, so you haven't mentioned caffeine yet. So you don't consume caffeine?
I don't drink coffee. I have no problem with caffeine whatsoever. I just don't like coffee. Never grew into it. So I drink zero coffee.
Shocking to me. Wow.
I drink zero coffee, but
Wow.
I have the, once or twice a week, I might have an energy drink, and depending on what type of training I'm doing, and I might, use a pre-workout supplement. I don't like to use them all the time and all year round because I don't want to develop a sort of dependency on it or become insensitive to the caffeine. But at most 200 to 250 milligrams of caffeine on training days. On non-training days, I usually don't have any at all.
Okay, so then walk me through it. So then you go to the gym. How many hours are you there? How many days a week is that?
Normally about 90 minutes, and of which
that's a long workout.
Well, about half an hour of that is going to be. I tend to bookend my workouts with cardio, so I tend to do 15 minutes of cardio, lift my weights, and then do another 15 minutes of cardio. I guess you could actually add a little bit more time if you add mobility work and stretching, which I'm trying to get better at doing more consistently, because for 20 years I've been beating myself up and, building muscle and worrying about getting jacked. But my flexibility and mobility, they're not bad, but they could be better. And so I want to put a little bit more focus on that. So after I finish my workout,
hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this. So So what do you do when you lift weights and you do like super slows, you do compound exercises, you do, sets, like how many reps, how many sets would you do?
Okay. So right for the past 6 months plus, I've been dealing with a couple of different injuries. So my training has been, it's still been just as consistent as usual, but it hasn't been as intense. This is probably like the least intense training I've done for 15 plus years, because I need to be cautious with not aggravating certain injuries.
Yeah,
So,
I hear you.
but typically with my training, I focus on compound movements. I've built most of my strength off of pretty simple exercises: bench press, incline press, shoulder press variations, pull-ups, some row variations, squats, deadlifts.
Squats,
I don't do
deadlifts. Yeah.
typical I haven't done heavy squats and deadlifts for several years at this point, actually.
Why?
Back squat, because I've got a lower back issue. I've got a degenerative disc in my lower back.
Ouch.
So I'm not setting any more deadlift records. For everyone who wants me to set more records, my deadlifting power peaked in 2016 or 2017. So I don't foresee myself breaking that. But I hit 600 plus pounds on a deadlift at a 180
Nice.
pound body weight, 180 pound body
Moly,
weight. So
that's nice.
that's not, that's not bad. So, but yeah, I focus on the big compound exercises and then throw a few isolation ones in there. To be honest, at this point, Peter, I still train like I'm trying to get stronger, but I'm pretty tapped out on my genetic potential after 20 years of training, unless I wanted to gain a ton of fat or I wanted to jump on performance enhancing drugs.
Okay.
And I don't want to do either of those things for various reasons. Beyond ego, I don't need to get a whole bunch stronger or try to gain another 10 pounds of muscle or anything like that. It's just I'm a pretty good big guy. I like my physique. I'm strong. I'm in good health, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize that. My ego's not. I'm not competing in anything, right? I'm not competing in anything. I want to be healthy. I want to be in shape, and I want to have longevity. So my training now is it's mostly maintenance, and I'm traveling so much as well that if I can maintain what I've built over the past 2 decades, then I'm more than happy. If I can get some tiny strength gains here and there, awesome. That's a bonus, but I don't push it to the point of risking injury.
And how do you split your workouts? Is it like upper body, lower body, push pull?
Yeah, pretty basic. Kind of a push pull legs at this point. I think that's how I started, and it's kind of what I've gone back to. When I was focused more on powerlifting, it was still kind of push pull legs. It was just that each workout would be based around one of the big lifts, right? So it would be more like bench, squat, deadlift, and then accessory movements for them. So the deadlift day was the pull day, the bench press day was the push day, the squat day was obviously the leg day. Yeah. And so that hasn't really changed. And I try to hit every muscle twice a week. I find that to be optimal, especially as a natural athlete. So that's it.
Okay, so I want to ask you about cardio in a second, but I'll just share something really quick. So I was turned on to, excuse me, knees over toes. So whenever I squat, I raise my heels. And whenever I'm on the leg sled, I put my toes to the bottom so that I try to put out my knees over my toes because I had knee surgery. And that's just been, I read that guy's book. I can't remember his name, Knees Over Toes, but that's just been an extraordinary thing. Reed, could you pull that Knees Over Toes book up? That's just been so helpful to me to do that. And I try to lift, since I do so much jujitsu now, I try to lift every time I go in the gym. I try to only lift legs because I'm also nursing so many injuries, like everywhere from life. So when you do squat, I know you said you don't, but did you used to put your knees over your toes, or do you recommend that, or what do you think of that?
I'm honestly not sure. I would hesitate to give an answer because I wouldn't want to say something uninformed that could potentially harm anybody.
Okay.
I know the old school knowledge always used to be don't put your knees over your toes.
Right.
But I think that's been somewhat debunked over the last decade or so.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about your cardio now. So how much time in any one interval? You said 15 minutes. How much time a week are you getting of
Mm.
cardio? And like, what's the
Okay.
maximum? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The best way to put it would be, so I do typically 20 to 30 minutes of real cardio per day, let's say 5 or 6 times a week. And then I also make sure that I always hit at least 10,000 steps a day in total.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I walk at least, let's say, 5 miles a day is kind of my minimum. Sometimes that goes up to 7, 8, sometimes even 10, depending on what I'm up to and where I am and how active I am. That's one downside of Dubai. It's like 108 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit right now. So unless I want to go for long strolls around the mall, which, by the way, sometimes I will do, I'll just go to one of the giant malls, and I'll do it partly to make sure that I get my steps in. I get the same issue when I'm in places like Houston or Las
Yeah.
Vegas
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
Florida, right? It's so hot that the weather can be a bit of an impediment. But I make sure I hit that 10K steps a day as a basic minimum, and that serves me pretty well. My cardio's quite unexciting. I normally walk on an incline at a fast walking speed, or I use the elliptical. Right now, I'm avoiding jogging because the sort of shock of it can aggravate my lower back a bit right now. But I'm not picky about the form of cardio. I'll mix it up a little bit just to make sure that I maintain. I always like to maintain a sort of a healthy level of every aspect of fitness. For my entire training career, I've always been focused more on strength and power and generating maximum force,
Yeah.
but and hypertrophy as well thrown in there. But I've always done my best to always have a decent cardiovascular level, right? So that I think physical preparedness in general is good. So if it was like, oh, for some reason I need to run 2 miles, I always want to be in a condition where I could run 2 miles and I'm not going to gas out. Am I in marathon shape? Very far from it. But I always like to maintain a degree of flexibility, of strength, of endurance,
Yeah.
of dexterity. I think it's important, just that general sort of baseline physical preparedness.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just a tangent story. I was on a rowboat with somebody, and this was a long time ago, and we were being kind of pushed out to sea. And at the time, I was lifting a lot of weights, and I was doing forced reps and negatives, lots of forced reps and negatives like that. I had been doing that for a year. And I think there's something to that idea of always, you should be able to run a certain amount of miles. You should be able to like row if you need to row, within the limits of one's body. I mean,
Mm.
personally, I feel that if I don't do at least, I have to do my cardio in at least 45-minute blocks. I just don't feel that I'm getting enough. Like I don't know. That's a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
By the way, I normally do. I'd say I typically do, just through my lifestyle, I typically do over an hour a day. Like I typically have over an hour of. I'd say I typically have like 2 hours of like active, 2 hours of like active time per day, of which 45 minutes to an hour is strength training, and an hour is sort of gym cardio.
yeah.
Plus, maybe half an hour is gym cardio, and
Yeah.
another half an hour or even an hour is just me walking around doing all my stuff, living life. As I've said, a lot of it depends on where I am. I find in some places I have days where I easily hit 20,000 plus steps in a day, easily.
Mm,
Uh, but it just depends on what I'm doing. I like to do as much stuff on foot. I do enjoy walking. I go on
yeah,
walks
I do
every
too.
day, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have days where I literally just sit down all day long. And if I find that that's happening, then I'm like, okay, oh my gosh, it's 4 p.m. and I've just been sitting all day. So
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
go out and very intentionally get those steps in.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay. So uh, supplements. What's your
Mm.
supplement routine?
Sure. So my main supplements that I use are whey protein. I almost don't consider it a supplement. I'd kind of just consider it a food item.
Yeah.
Creatine, most of the time, 5 grams a day. Omega-3 oil derived from fish oil. I normally take that in liquid form, but if I'm traveling, in capsule form. Vitamin D, particularly if I'm in a cold and dark region. I don't need it so much if I'm in Florida or Dubai.
Boy, I have to say,
D,
up to this point, your supplements and my supplements are identical. See what I do.
Yep. Zinc and magnesium. Those are the staples. Once in a while, if I think I'm deficient in something or I need something for a specific reason, then I might add more to it. But those are my daily staples. I've also just full disclosure, I'm now partnered with them as of about 2 weeks ago, but I haven't even started rolling any ads for them. But there's a product called Optimal Human, which is it's a greens drink, but it's also got some adaptogenic mushrooms, prebiotic, probiotic. It's essentially it's almost like a multivitamin plus. And I actually really like the taste of it. It tastes like matcha. So I've started throwing a scoop of that into my whey protein shake or just taking it with water as well. So that's a new addition. But yeah, full disclosure. So no one thinks I'm like, he's just shilling his product. It's like, no, I wouldn't use it if
They'd say that even if you, they'd say that even if you didn't. You know?
Yeah.
Grifter, Nazi, moron.
Yeah.
We've heard it all. Okay. So what about your sleep regimen? Tell me about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. This is probably my weakest element. If there was one thing that I could improve with my health, it would probably be this. But I also don't need as much sleep as most people. And I'm not saying that as some type of a macho thing or some type of cope. My perfect amount of sleep is about 7 hours, 10 minutes.
Wow.
So
low.
My actual average is closer to 6 hours 20, 6 hours 30. That's my average.
Oh my gosh.
Tracked over multiple years, my average is about 6 hours 25. So I would like to get that up to 7. I sleep 8 hours plus, maybe 10 to 15 times a year.
Wow.
But that's just, I know they say, everyone needs 8 or 9 hours. That's just not my set point. And I'm a pretty alert and a very alert and active individual. And I feel fine with, let's say 6 to 7 hours, I'm going to be totally fine. If I get less than 6, I'll be a bit groggy. If I get under 5, I won't feel good. 5.5, I'll be a little bit groggy. 6 plus, I'm fine. 7 plus, I'm fantastic.
Yeah, that's interesting. I used to have a lot of trouble sleeping. It's a long story. I won't go into it. And so I went to see a sleep doctor, and what he said blew my mind. He said, similar to what you said, even more extreme though. He said, people think that you need 8 hours of sleep. Everyone needs 8 hours of sleep. That's just not true. He's had some patients who had very little sleep. And he told me he had 2 patients. Okay, I'm glad you're sitting down for this. He said he had 2 patients, both of whom required 16 hours a day of sleep.
Whoa.
That was my response. Like 16 hours a day. Like that's like what kind of a life would that be? 16 hours a day of sleep. But he told me that, and it completely blew my mind. Okay. Anyway,
were they 3 months old?
No, they were adults. They were adults who came to a sleep disorder. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? Like, wow. I just can't even Okay. Anyway, I got to stop thinking about 16 hours sleep. Okay.
No, that's a curse. That would actually be a curse.
Yeah. Okay. So we went diet, sleep, exercise. So you tweet out. Don't you have like 1 million Twitter followers or something like that, or you have some platforms?
1.2 now.
Wow, that's
1.2 million.
Awesome. Good for you, man. That's good for you. You're reaching a lot of people, and you're changing people. I love the tenor and the tone of your tweets. There's just so. I look at it and I'm like, okay, I got this. Okay. So let me ask you a question then. What general kind of advice do you have for people to, as they navigate the complexities of a demented world, particularly here in the US, and a lot of stress around the election season? And I will certainly admit I'm not a fan of the two leading candidates, to say the least.
Yeah.
What what's the best? It's the best America has to offer. What
Dude, I have to say, that's one of the things I find most confusing about the USA,
which
because
is what?
there's 350 million people there.
Hmm.
Some of the brightest, smartest, most successful people in every field and every sector. And somehow, every election season, when the 4 years rolls around, the two remaining options are like, wait,
I know, and
this
look who we
how did
got.
this happen?
Look who
Yeah.
we got. Faisal Al-Mutar. Faisal, hey Faisal, it's a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, Faisal.
Awesome.
Okay, so do you have any advice for people as they, like, I don't know, whether it be my advice is always like, go back to your diet, sleep, and exercise, and cut out the freaking sugar. Like, stop it with the sugar. But do you have any general or more specific? I think sugar is a poison. It's a total toxin. We could do a whole podcast, and I should get Gary Taub on the show. Gary Taub's. Yeah. Any advice as people go into this election season and they're trying to figure things out?
Yeah, I've got plenty. I've been, for the past year, I've been working on a book on this, just sort of breaking down my mindset and philosophies on a range of different topics. So it's a very open-ended question. So maybe I'll tackle it from a couple different areas. I think that human beings, we're not all that complicated, really. We have our most basic needs, and the most basic ones are, we can't skip over those because most people aren't doing the basics very well in modern developed countries. So we've already talked about nutrition, literally the fuel that you are providing your body with, right? Like what your whole body, your brain, everything is running on. If you're fueling your body with garbage, just super ultra processed foods, alcohol, some people are, lots of people have, well, you want to talk a toxin. I mean, alcohol it's a poison.
You're right.
So,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, significant percentages of the population are quite literally eating and drinking poison all day long. And then they're like, oh, I don't feel good. Why don't I feel good? And it's like, well, if you put sunflower oil in your car instead of petrol or diesel, then it's not going to run very well. So I agree with you. Nutrition is one of the first and foremost things. Lifestyle, nutrition, exercise. Most people are not exercising enough. I think the average American walks 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day when you should really be hitting 8,000 at least, but I'd say 10,000 plus. So you need to be exercising. You should be exercising, doing some type of cardio. You should be doing some type of strength training. Our bodies are designed to move.
Yeah.
Human beings have always been moving. We're supposed to move. You touched on sleep. Sleep is very important as well. And so let's look at the different areas. So we've got physical. Of course, you have mental as well. And a lot of people are constantly poisoning themselves on this front as well. I think the average amount of screen time now is, I know for teenagers, I think it's 8 hours per day on social media. I think the average American watches 3 hours of TV a day and then another 4 to 5 hours on social media. So people are spending 7, 8, and keep in mind that's an average. So that means for every person spending 2 hours on screen time, there's another person doing 14 hours or something like that. So too much staring at screens. And it's not just the staring at the screens, but it's also the content that's on there. If you're just consuming negativity, fear porn, real porn, just whether it's through the big TV at your home or it's through the small screen on your hands, people need to really tailor what they're watching and what they're listening to. I like the idea that your diet isn't just what you eat and drink with your mouth, but it's also what you consume with your eyes. It's what you consume with your ears. It's everything that you're consuming, and it all has some type of effect and influence on you. So I'm not saying you bury your head in the sand or you go and, live in a cabin in the woods, although that might not be a terrible idea if you're an introvert. But, tailor your media diet. Go look over the people who you're following on social media. Is there someone who you're following who's just making you angry every day and they're just posting stuff that upsets you? It's like, well, you don't have to follow them, right? It's a choice. You're
Right.
choosing to see that, if you're the TV, whatever it is. So I think people need to clean up that aspect as well. Relationships, massive factor. Again, we're a social species. We all know this. So friends, family, your community. However, this could look very different for different people. So I'm not going to make assumptions based on people's lifestyle, but we all need human connection. We all need human connection. We all need friendships. We need love. We need people to just chat with. Even people you don't know. Those day-to-day interactions of just like walking past people on the street and smiling at people and saying hi to the cashier in the shop. And I think all of that stuff is really important. I think it's massively underrated, just those little day-to-day niceties. All of that stuff is important, the deep connections, and even I'd say the shallow ones as well. Me personally, I'm a man of faith, so faith is very important to me. I know people are going to have different perspectives on that, but I think, again, I believe human beings, we're spiritual beings. I find that even a lot of people who don't believe in God or a higher power believe in some type of spirituality. And I think we're absolutely wired to. So that's going to look different for different people. But having a sense of faith and a higher meaning and a purpose of what you are doing here on this earth, I think that's extremely important. I think it's something that's actually easier for religious people because we kind of by default have answers to these things and the meaning and the purpose. If you are not religious in a traditional sense, then there are other ways that you can find meaning and you can find purpose, but you need to have a motivating, driving force to your life. It can't just be the nihilism of okay, well, shrug, right? I'm just here. I don't really know my meaning, my purpose, my place, right? We all have to be driven. We have to be driven by something, and that keeps you constantly motivated. And it allows you to look, if someone is stuck for this, if someone is like, hey, I don't know what to do, and
that was my next question. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what I would suggest is, and this is a Christian ideal, but it goes beyond Christianity, and this is live your life in service to others. Find out how you, with your combination of your personality, your experience, your talents, your skill sets, how can you be of service to others? How can you make other people's lives better in some way, shape, or form? And that's, again, this will look totally different for different people. But if you can find what that thing is, if you can find that way you can consistently be contributing to your family, your community, your nation, the human population as a whole in some type of way, then that's an incredible way to always have meaning and purpose and to know that it creates that positive feedback loop as well. I think that I'm no psychologist or mental health expert, but from my viewpoint, I think that a lot of what we call mental health issues, a lot of it is lifestyle driven, but I think a lot of it is also people getting stuck within themselves in a strange way. It's kind of it's an odd form of selfishness. It's an odd form of self-obsession where you're so focused on yourself and your own brain and your own struggles and your own issues and so on that you become depressed or anxious because you're so inwardly focused. Whereas if you turn out towards others and you think more of like, okay, I want to help more people. How can I help people? It could be big, it could be small. How can I make other people's lives better just in some little way? How can I encourage someone? Is there somebody I can teach in some way? I think if people have children, I don't yet have my own children, but I think that's a massive driver for all of these things because that's very clearly a lifelong mission. If someone is a parent and they're like, hey, I don't know what to do, it's like, well, you got a pretty massive mission right there who has half of your genetics and probably looks a little bit like you. So I think all of these combination of factors are all important. And I think most people have at least some of them in place. I think the people who are most consistently happy and content and healthy in mind, body, and soul tend to have a lot of them in place. And I think that if you can try to just get to, I don't know, let's say we're ranking each of these things on one out, from 1 to 10. Let's say you've got, I don't know how many things I've mentioned, but you've got 8 to 10 different areas of your life, and you honestly rank yourself in each of those areas. And then you see the things, okay, oh, wow, I think I'm only a 1 or a 2 or a 3 in this regard. You could have someone who's doing, I don't know, they're doing great in their career. They have a wonderful family, good friends, good network. They have meaning, they have purpose. They're being driven by something, but they're obese. Okay, easy one for you, right? Get your health under control, right? Get that piece under control. You could have the flip side. You could have a guy, he's a guy or a gal, wonderful shape, gym junkie. They've got all these other things they're doing. They've got their nutrition, they got their diet, they got their sleep, all of that physical stuff is dialed in. But when it comes to their sense of meaning and purpose in the world, they're kind of drifting and listless. It's like, okay, that's the area that you need to work on. And I think another last point I'll make on this, because I don't want to just do a full diatribe, but another thing I would say as well is to just start in each of these areas. You don't need to have it all worked out from the beginning. So sometimes people never start a workout program, or they never clean up their diet, or they never start that business venture, or they never start that creative activity, whatever it is, because they want to have the perfect plan and have all of the information and listen to all the podcasts and read all the books before they even get started. And you don't need to do that. You can you can build the plane as it's flying, right? Metaphorically. And so you just get started, right? If you're like, hey, okay, I need to exercise more. I'm like, you know what, just you can literally get up and go out for a walk. Commit to doing 20 push-ups a day. Start with, you know what, I'm going to walk 20 minutes and I'm going to do 20 push-ups a day. It could be, start very, very small, whatever it is, super simple. And once you start to form that habit, then you can learn more and you can build it up and you can start to add to the complication. But I don't think it's good to just be stagnant. I often recommend to people just start with the information you have and what you already know. Just get started in a positive direction. And then once you've got a little bit of momentum going, I think it's a lot easier to build around it rather than the standing start.
Wow, that was really good. I think that's very solid advice. Many people have talked about the importance, if you want meaning in your life, to help other people and we build those communities. We're going to do one quick super chat, and then I'm going to let you go. Excuse me. Christian Packard, $5. God bless you, Zuby. You bear great fruit of the Spirit, my friend. A beautiful vessel. Praise Jesus. And that's
Amen. Thank you.
From Christian Packard. And, I'm an atheist, so it's good that atheists and believers and Muslims and everybody can still have, Muslims and believers, but Hindus and people of all faiths and no faith can still have conversations with each other.
I just had one more thought, and actually what you just said there sparked another thought.
Please.
And this is to be kind.
Oh,
it might sound it might sound trite, but really be kind to people. Be kind to yourself, right? Don't beat yourself up psychologically, but just be kind to other people. If you walk around exuding a negative energy, and I don't mean this in like any sort of woo-woo sense, right? Just if you're that person who's constantly angry and bitter and aggressive and overly confrontational for no reason, and you're just going around rubbing people the wrong way, you're being rude to people, just all of that, then number one, it's going to be reflected back at you, because human beings tend to be reciprocal.
Absolutely.
We tend to smile at people who smile at us. We tend to laugh with people who laugh with us. if someone comes at you with aggression, you're likely to respond with aggression in kind. This is just how we are. So if you're in one of these negative loops, again, you can start by, look, if you've got some relationship in your life, it could be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, an old friend, and you're not on good terms, right? You've got some type of beef, some type of resentment, some type of animosity. A lot of people are holding this. Go pick up the phone. Be the person. Pick up the phone, send them a text, and squash it. I'd say particularly if it's a family member, right? Even more so. You don't want to be living with these grudges and these burdens. And you find that if you're just kind to people, most people in this world, I've traveled a lot. I've been to over 40 countries, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, belief, politics. Most people are decent, or at least trying to be.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, there are some really terrible people in the world, but they're a very small minority. So if you are just kind and decent to people, they'll treat you better. You'll treat yourself better. You'll find that you have more opportunities. You'll find more chances to have friendships and make acquaintances. You might even find new business opportunities, whatever it might be. But your reputation is very important as well. So I'd say both from just an ethical perspective, and I'd even say from a tactical and success perspective, it pays to just be selfish and selfless. It pays to be kind and polite. It doesn't cost you anything. I can't think of many upsides. I can't think of many upsides to being mean.
Yeah, my dad told me one of the things that excuse me, I try to do is, if I have a good meal in a restaurant, I'll try to always go back and thank the people, because he worked in a restaurant, and he'd say he heard a lot of the criticisms, but very rarely did people come and say, "Hey, thanks so much." Excuse me. So one more, last one, then we'll go. Trader Bear, friend of the show, $9.99. Thanks, Trader Bear. Big fan of Zuby. How can we get young folks out of the narcissism trap of social media? It's probably a whole new podcast. There's a whole world out there, and so many people are emotionally starving. Have they been happy or in love?
Wow, this is that's a tricky one. I mean, I would have a two-pronged approach on this. I would say, some people would go with the extreme, just completely go cold turkey, and that might be a good answer for some people, right? I do certainly recommend social media breaks, but I'd say two things. Number one is I would recommend reducing usage. So unless you're in the small percentage of people whose life and career is heavily dependent on a lot of social media use, which is probably under 1%. Maybe it's like, I'd say under 2 or 3% of the population. Then certainly taper it down. If you're spending 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours a day on social media, you could cut that by 50%. You could probably cut it by
for sure
80. I was going to say you could cut it by 50 easily, and realistically, you could probably cut it by 80, right? You could probably cover everything you want to in 2 hours. So I'd say significantly reduce it and replace it with some type of productive hobby or activity, for sure. Even better if it's outdoors. And then the second thing I would say is I'd reiterate a point I made earlier, which is to be very cognizant and cautious about what it is that you're consuming while you're on there, because it's not really all created equal. I know it's kind of trendy to complain about social media and the media in general, but it's not all the same. It's not all the same, right? Like, depending on who you're following and how you're behaving, two people's experiences on X or on Instagram or on YouTube, it'll be entirely different, right? If you're just stuck in, the culture war and fighting and yelling and screaming and just fighting people all day, or trolling and negativity, that's not going to put you in a good mind state. But if you're using these platforms to follow people who are inspirational, who are teaching you things, who are offering you encouragement, support groups, networks, that kind of thing, then it can actually be a net positive. I would say for me, I would say social media has been a massive net positive in my life. I have moments where I can tell it's becoming a negative, and I catch it and I take action. I take every Sunday off, and I think that's been a very good practice for me, just to have a weekly reset and realize, okay, because you get the FOMO as well. You realize that you're not really missing anything. And actually, when I come back on Monday, I'm like, sometimes I don't really even want to be back on there. So I would recommend those couple things: taper it down and use your time on there wisely.
Awesome. Well, I'm very grateful that you came on and you had a conversation. And where can people find you if they want to look up your work or your music? Where should they go?
Sure thing. So if you go to teamzuby.com, you can check out my music. You can get my books on there. You can also get, I've got a big range of merchandise, so it's all available at teamzuby.com. And if you would like to follow me on any social media platform, same handle on everything. It's just at Zuby Music, Zuby Music, and you can find me wherever you are looking.
Great. Okay, don't hang up yet, because we're going to make sure your thing is uploaded. Again, Zuby, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And hopefully people will be using a lot of these tips and they can live better lives. That's both of our hopes.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate your time.
Right on. Thanks, Reed. Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance, nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.